The Berlin Wall was one of the most important landmarks of the 20th century and a symbol of division and oppression. It was erected in 1961, separating Berlin into East and West, a physical and ideological divide between communism and capitalism during the Cold War. Its fall on November 9, 1989, marked not just the end of a divided Germany, but also a turning point in world history. But how did this symbol of tyranny rise, and what led to its dramatic fall? Let's unravel the story behind the Berlin Wall. The occupational future of Germany was fiercely contested by the Allied powers immediately after World War II, with the nation divided into four occupation zones, those controlled by the United States, the Soviet Union, Britain, and France. Berlin, though lying wholly within the Soviet zone, was also divided similarly. Ideological differences sealed the split by 1949. West Germany, otherwise known as the Federal Republic of Germany, welcomed capitalism and democracy. East Germany, or German Democratic Republic, was allied to the communist policies of the Soviet Union. This was what was referred to as the Berlin Wall. It was on August 13, 1961, that the government of East Germany, in full support by the Soviet Union, began to build the Berlin Wall as a means of staunching the mass flight of its people westward. Indeed, since 1949, upwards of 2.5 million East Germans had fled to the West, which for the East had produced a dramatic brain drain and a very grave economic crisis. What had begun as barbed wire and barricades would give way to a fortified concrete wall 96 miles long, with watchtowers, guard dogs, and a death strip. The families were separated, and overnight, life changed in Berlin. The other side was nearly impossible to cross, with the wall a grim omen of the costs of such a division. To live in divided Berlin was to live life apart, dependent on which side of the wall one called home. The East Berliners had lives of surveillance, propaganda, and scant freedoms. The wall cut through families, friendships, and opportunities. This is a culture of fear and isolation. Though daring, most of these attempts ended tragically. An estimated 140 people lost their lives trying to cross the wall. The West Berliners, although living in the shadow of the wall, did enjoy more freedoms and economic prosperity. This marked a strong contrast in the two sides in terms of differences in the ideological approach between the East and West. The Berlin Wall came to epitomize the Cold War, but its construction has symbolized ideological battles between the United States of America and the Soviet Union. In general, the overall condemnation was mainly done by the Western nations, with the Eastern Bloc coming in as the defenders, claiming Western aggression as their reasons for doing so. It was an international physical and psychological barrier, a focus of diplomatic wrangling, a staple topic of world media, and the object of countless protests. The Iron Curtain now came alive in the physical form of the wall as a symbol of the division of the world into two hostile camps. The Berlin Wall did not fall overnight, but was due to years of built-up political, social, and economic pressures felt within Eastern Europe. Mikhail Gorbachev presided over an extremely radical transformation of the Soviet Union in the 1980s. He introduced policies of openness, or glasnost, and restructuring, or perestroika, designed to revitalize both the Soviet economy and society, but effectively fomenting dissent within its satellite states. The reforms that he initiated in Moscow inspired Eastern Europeans to insist upon greater freedoms for themselves and radical changes in their countries. Meanwhile, the awakened winds of movements like Poland's Solidarity inspired voices and people in Eastern Europe against the undemocratic regimes. Protest actions, strikes, and demands for democratic reforms went up like wildfire. Not even East Germany could escape the change that had arrived, even under a hardline leadership. November 9, 1989, is one of those dates that went down in history. The events surrounding the fall of the wall were somewhat accidental, but powerfully compelling. In the face of growing protests, the East German authorities decided to lift some of the travel curfews in an effort to placate the people. During a live broadcast televised evening press conference, the Politburo's spokesperson Günter Schabowski, an apparatchik who seemed unfamiliar with the details, announced that starting directly, East Germans could travel across into West Berlin. Thousands of East Berliners had stormed the checkpoints, catching the border guards unprepared. The guards did not have an order to take forceful means and let them through. Crowds from both sides surged into the streets, greeting each other in tears, hacking off pieces of the no-man's land wall for souvenirs. The fall of the Berlin Wall was a moment of euphoria. Long-separated families were embracing, and strangers dancing in the streets. People climbed onto the wall, waving flags, singing songs of unity. For many, the fall of the wall symbolized hope, freedom, and the triumph of the human spirit. The jubilation between the citizens of East and West Berlin set up the onlook for citizens around the world and inspired millions. It was one of those nights of ecstatic joy, and yet a moment for reflection of all the pain and division caused by that wall. The reunification of Germany was as monumental as it was complicated. Once the wall fell, talks about East and West German merger did not take long time. On the 3rd of October 1990, less than a year from the fall of the wall, Germany finally became united. Transition was a very economically arduous process because old infrastructure and industries in the East needed colossal investments to reach Western-level development. Socially, however, integration between two peoples molded through decades of ideological differences was hard to mold. The determination that rebuilding and reconciling meant to see the problems through, with stubborn determination. Today, the unity of Germany attests to dogged consistency and common aims. This victory was symbolic, not only for the Germans, but also for the international community. The fall of Berlin marked the end of the Cold War and gave a new perspective to international relations. The breakdown of the wall opened the way for the dissolution of the Soviet Union, democratization of the whole Eastern Europe, and expansion of both NATO and the European Union. The fall of the wall also proved that no authoritarian regime can suppress human desire for freedom to a certain limit. It emerged as a significant example for the other nations trying to establish democracy and justice in their countries. This is the story of the Berlin Wall, which signifies division, persistence, and ultimately triumph. The story teaches lessons on the significance of unity and the human spirit's ability to be strong and unbroken. For nearly 3 decades, the wall was erected, but it could not stifle the voices of the people who craved freedom. It stands to remind one of the cost of division and how, where possible, conflict should be resolved through dialogue and mutual understanding. Where once a wall stood, its fall proved that even against barriers seemingly insurmountable, change is possible. Although the Berlin Wall is long torn down, it lives on. Millions of tourists come to Berlin every year. Several stretches of the wall have been left standing as monuments and memorials to history, extremely powerful reminders. Perhaps one of the biggest tourist attractions here is the East Side Gallery, some 1.3 kilometers of wall space that was transformed into an open-air gallery. Artists of all nationalities have painted in a riot of colors, mostly reflecting themes of liberty, unity, and hope. Another site that should not be missed is the Berlin Wall Memorial on Bernauer Straße. It gives enormous background on the history of the wall. Some sections of the actual wall are revealed, with watchtowers and exhibitions on how lives of people were affected. Visitors may also head down to Checkpoint Charlie, which was one of the famous crossing points between East and West Berlin, housing a museum. These sites attract not only tourists, but also educate forthcoming generations so that the lesson of the Berlin Wall will not be forgotten. The Berlin Wall has become a bookmark in popular culture, inspiring a spate of books, movies, songs, and artworks. Movies like The Lives of Others and Goodbye Lenin explore life under the shadow of the curtain of secrecy, where the fall of the Berlin Wall had consequences in Germany. Novels like Stasiland delve into personal stories of people living under the oppressive regime of East Germany. Music also played a great role. David Bowie's Heroes, recorded in Berlin, was an anthem of hope and resilience, while Pink Floyd's The Wall drew parallels between personal and societal barriers. The wall has also influenced graffiti culture, with its surfaces becoming canvases for protest art and messages of solidarity. The Berlin Wall in pop culture is omnipresent and echoes with the audience globally, reminding them of its historical significance. What is left as its legacy, the Berlin Wall has been reflected upon not only by historians, but also by politicians. To many, it is an immediate reminder of what ideological extremism can do with a nation and how huge the costs of such division are. Lessons have been learned from the rise and fall of the wall about governance, international relations, and human rights. The wall was also a very strong reminder, in retrospect, of people's might to change things. Peaceful protests and grassroots movements that led to its fall testified to the power of people acting together. It has remained a beacon of hope in the modern world, proof that even the strongest barriers can fall when people unite and stick together. From construction to collapse, the Berlin Wall represents separation, struggle, and triumph. It has been a grim reminder that humankind is equally capable of conflict as reconciliation. The fall on November 9, 1989, was not that of a physical barrier falling, but that of an era being born from the blocks of unity, hope, and freedom. Lessons to be learnt from the Berlin Wall abound with us even to this day. Tear down the walls, physical and metaphorical, which separate us.